Hi, supervisors. So I just wanted to take a minute to touch base with you. There seems to be some confusion with where we should be entering items such as weight, bowel movement, seizure, and menstrual charts. So I just want to point out a few things that I'm hearing from some of you, just to clear up some confusion. So right now I'm logged in as Abraham Lincoln, and he is in this system as a DSP. That's what I switched him to for this little video. So you see his home screen as a DSP is a little different from yours as an FLD or senior FLD or program director, and certainly different from mine. The reason for that is because DSP, that role is a built-in role within iCM. That is a role that every single agency has. So they have created this sort of default home screen that I do not currently have the ability to change. It's just something that is automatically built in for anybody who has a DSP role. Now, you guys as supervisors, you have more access to them, so your home screen looks a little different. So I just want to show you, because there seems to be some confusion that DSPs can enter certain information into these little shortcut tabs on their home screen, and that is not at all the case. So if a DSP were to click on this little shortcut button for weight record, it's going to pull up a screen that looks like they can input weight, but they cannot input weight. So like I could come in here and say for Donald Duck and say, you know, it's 7:02 and he is 152 pounds, and I can type in a note, but I can't save that. This view button is not going to save that. This view button is actually just going to take us basically to a weight chart where if there were any weights entered for him, you would be able to see a graph and you would see all of the weights entered down here. Now, this is my test guy, so I haven't entered any weights for him, but your DSPs cannot enter anything through those shortcut buttons on their home screen. That is not how we're doing that here at Bell & McCree. All of those charts that I mentioned in the beginning, the weight chart, seizure chart, menstrual chart, bowel movement chart, all of that needs to be done through the care tracker because it is scheduled within the care tracker of when it needs to be done. So these sort of shortcut buttons on a DSP's home screen, I guess it could be helpful for them if they want to pull up the information quickly, but it is not something for them to actually enter the data for. If they clicked on the BM record here, it's going to be the same deal. It's going to look like they can input things, but then they're not going to have any ability to save it. They can only go to view, and then they can view a chart of information that has been entered through the care tracker, okay? Eventually, iCM will be giving me the ability to kind of customize everybody's screen so that I can take some of this off of the DSP screen, or maybe I can add the shortcuts onto your guys' screen as supervisors. But right now, that is not an option. So in this video, I'm going to show you sort of a brief overview of the care tracker and these charts in the care tracker. I know it's been a long time since I first showed this. This was back at like, what, last March, I think, when we first went over all of this. So I'm going to go through a brief overview of, you know, how these charts work within the care tracker and where you should, where you can find them. And then I'll also show you how to pull them up in somebody's e-chart. So that, you know, you don't have to worry about not having these shortcut buttons. You have the ability to look at these charts elsewhere, okay? So while I'm still in the DSP role, I can show you the care tracker. So the first one that I want to go over with you is seizure records. Okay, so if somebody has a seizure record or seizure chart, then you will see this as an as-needed chart for every single shift. No matter what button up here I click, you're going to see this as-needed seizure record chart at the top, okay? And in order to document a seizure, you would just click on this as needed. These are all of the options that you would be checking off on a paper form. So I'm just going to randomly check some things off. Here, you have the ability to say occurrence not noticed and occurrence noticed. Obviously, if you're charting for a seizure that took place, then an occurrence was noted. The time, likely you're going to be going in here charting the seizure after the fact because you had to time it, you had to call the nurse, whatever that was. Hopefully it's not too far after the fact, but let's say it happened at 6:45, okay? You can leave time taken blank. And then down in the note section, you would input how long the seizure lasted. So maybe Seizure lasted 30 seconds. It all depends on the person's seizure protocol, but in this case, maybe we call the nurse after every seizure. So seizure lasted 30 seconds. Call the nurse. You always want to put the nurse's name. So we'll do Jackie Miller. Spoke with Nurse Jackie Miller, sorry. Spoke with Nurse Jackie Miller. And then anything that the nurse asked you to do. So she asked that we monitor Donald and call back if he has another seizure in the next, 3 hours. Okay. And again, that all depends on the person's seizure protocol. And then once you're done, you would click done. Okay. And it's as needed. So if he had another one, you would just click on this as needed again, and you can add as many of these as you need. Okay. Also want to show you if it's the end of the month for a seizure record, again, think what we do on paper, we also have to do in iCM. So at the end of the month, if somebody did not have any seizures, okay, I'm actually going to go back to the 31st. And we'll do this for January. And we'll say Donald didn't have any seizures for the whole month of January. So what I'm going to do as an FLD is I'm going to come in here on the last day of the month. And I'm going to click on this. And instead of clicking any of the services provided, I'm going to say an occurrence was not noticed. I can leave the time. That's fine. And then down in the notes, I would write exactly what I would write across that paper log. And it seems to be 2 different ones. Either we can just write, no seizures for the month, or you could write, no, it would help if I could type, no seizures, whoopsie, for the month of January. Okay. And then you click done. And now that's charted for the month. So that when the nurse comes in to pull up the seizure record, then he or she is looking and they can see that you have properly done your documentation. So again, just think everything that we had to do on paper, we now have to do in the system. So just like at the end of the month, you would write across that seizure record and say there were no seizures for this month. You have to do the same thing within iCM. Okay. And that's just, you'd be going in the last day of the month. You could go in, maybe today's February 1st, you can go back and say, okay, we've passed that last day of the month. I can now go back and do that documentation. Okay. Okay. So the next one that I want to show is the menstrual record. This would obviously only be for our ladies who require this. And this is in here just like the seizure record as an as-needed record, because obviously this is something that we can't predict. We don't know when we're going to have to document this, especially if somebody does not have a regular cycle. So this is just going to show up as an as needed. No matter what shift you're in, you're going to see this, and you just click on as needed. For services provided, you would just indicate, just like you would on our paper chart, what type of flow it was. So maybe in this case, it was spotting. You have the ability to say occurrence not noticed and occurrence noticed. These are just kind of built-in statuses. So obviously, if you're documenting for something, you would say occurrence noticed. Okay. Again, you can change this time. So if this is not the time, maybe, you notice this and then you have to help, help her change, help her get cleaned up. Maybe this happened at 6. Okay. If you have any notes, you can put any notes. So if this is, not normal for this person, and they're not supposed to get their period anymore, and the nurse has said, if this happens, then you need to call the nurse just for directives. So maybe we did call the nurse. And again, if you speak to any nurse, you do want to put the name in here. So, call the nurse and spoke with Nurse Jackie Miller. Nurse recommended that we make a PCP appointment to follow up. And again, you can use mentions in your notes. So if you are, if one of your DSPs wanted to let you know, maybe your DSP is the one that did this, you could then say, hey, am I in here? I'm in here, aren't I? You can say, hey, Trisha, please let me know, if you want me to make the appointment, or if you will be doing that. Okay, so it's just a nice little way to communicate back and forth. It's a nice paper trail for your staff and for you as well. Just to show, hey, I did follow up. Hey, I did tell my supervisor. Hey, I did do what the nurse told me to do. Okay, and then again, anytime you have mentions, as long as you have that turned on within your profile within iCM, then you will get that alert, and you'll get that up here at the bell icon. Okay. All right, so the next one that I want to show you is the bowel movement chart. And this you're going to see it is scheduled for each shift. So that's just like our paper bowel movement chart that required the documentation for each shift. So any shift you go into, a minute, it's my internet, then you'll see this bowel movement chart, okay? Also, and what I'm not seeing, because she's my test person, I might not have set her up correctly, you'll also have an as needed bowel movement chart, and it's gonna look the exact same way as I'll show you right now. But you're gonna come into the evening, and just like our paper chart, you know, this staff should be going in here every evening. You have a nice little compliance meter here. Your compliance for this, as well as, you know, a little line compliance meter over here. Your compliance meter should be, you know, 100% over here, and it should be green over here by the end of the day. Okay, so any button here that is not marked as needed requires documentation, just like our paper charts did. Okay, so in this case, you would say, you know, you have the ability to pick your status. You have occurrence not noticed, occurrence noticed, or refused. So in this case, if this, you know, she didn't have a bowel movement during this shift, I could say occurrence not noticed, and I could say, you know, no BM. And then obviously I wouldn't pick a Bristol stool type. I don't have to put the time taken. And then unless there's something out of the norm here, or I need to make a note of this for my supervisor, I don't need to put notes in here. I can just click done. Okay. If, you know, this person did have a bowel movement, we would say that the occurrence was noticed, and we would click on, you know, whichever one it was. Maybe it was a small bowel movement, and then we would pick the Bristol stool type. Maybe it was this one. Okay. Again, I don't have to put the time taken, and I don't have to put notes unless there's something, you know, unusual that I need to make a note of up here. Okay. Something that you might want to make a note of would be if it was a loose bowel movement, and this is like the third bowel movement, you might want to put in here, hey, I called the nurse because this is the third loose bowel movement that this person had during my shift. And this is what the nurse said to do. Okay. Those are the kind of notes that you would put in here. You also have the ability to say that somebody refused. So obviously this is not a refusing to go to the bathroom. This is an indication of a person's pretty independent, and even though the nurse is asking us to keep a bowel movement chart for this person because of maybe a type of medication they're on, the person refuses to tell you that they had a bowel movement. And then you can say refused and bowel movement not known. And then obviously, again, you wouldn't be able to pick a type of Bristol stools type, okay? So that is how you would document this. So I'm actually gonna pick one here so I can show you the chart later on. I'm going to go ahead and say done. Sorry, this person hasn't had records in here. So I'm going to go ahead and ignore that alert, but that alert will come up if a person hasn't had a bowel movement within 3 days, because that's our protocol and our policy here at Bell & McCrae. Okay. Okay, so the last chart that I want to show you within our care tracker is the weight chart. I do want to point out to you that monthly weights are scheduled within iCM for the 20th of every month in the evening. Now, obviously, you can, you can do this before, you can do this after. You have the ability to move forward and backward within the care tracker by simply clicking on this calendar. So if it was the 18th and you were taking it, before the 20th, you can click on the 20th. If it's now the 26th and you need to go back and enter it, you would enter it on the 20th, okay? We have to have it scheduled within the care tracker. Also want to show you that it is on the evening. So obviously, if you say, hey, the 20th works for me, but I actually take my weights in the house, in the morning. Totally fine. Just click on the evening. If it's 7 a.m., just move forward in the care tracker and select the weight, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and click on this. Oh, one more thing. If it's a weekly weight, by default, it will be added to the care tracker every Thursday evening. But if, there's a preference for that person to get weighed, maybe, Monday mornings or whatever, please let me know. Reach out to me with specifics. This person needs their weights entered on this day during this shift. Otherwise, I don't know who to change within your house. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this and show you this weight chart really quick. So you have the ability to say their weight is stable, meaning, maybe they are the same weight from last month, or maybe their weight has only fluctuated, 1 or 2 pounds. Either way, that's pretty darn stable. If that's the case, you would say that weight is stable. If they have increased 5 pounds or more, again, our policy is that you notify the nurse. That's something that is written in dimensional healthcare policy and procedures. Also, you have the ability to say that weight has decreased 5 pounds or more. And again, any weight fluctuation, 5 pounds one way or the other, you're going to notify the nurse. In this case, I'm going to say that this weight is stable. For statuses, you have a couple different options. You can say completed, which if I took the weight, then obviously this, this task is completed. You could say occurrence not noticed. So maybe, we weren't able to do any services because maybe this person is in hospital, maybe this person is home for an extended period of time, whatever that may be. That's your ability to say, hey, we weren't able to take weights at this time. Then you can go ahead and say occurrence not noticed, okay? You also have the ability to say that they refused, because our people obviously have the ability to say, I refuse to get on that scale. That is not something that I want to do. And that is an individual right. So we can say that they refuse, and this is our way to document that, right? So in this case, I'm going to say completed, and I'm going to say, the weight is stable. I can change that time. If I didn't take the time at 7:22 p.m., I can change the time. And then here is where I would enter the weight. So this is for Daisy Duck. So I will be kind to her. Maybe she's 135 pounds. Okay. If you have notes, you can put notes, but if everything is fine, weight's stable, this is a normal weight for her, nothing out of the ordinary, you don't have to put any notes. Again, if the weight did increase, so maybe she went from 135 to 142, that's a pretty big jump for Miss, little Miss Daisy Duck, then you would say, weight increased. Significantly. I would put in there, if it was unplanned or not, if they had seen, Jen Whitlock, our nutritionist, and the goal was for them to gain weight or lose weight, then you can put in here that, that was planned, but I'm still going to call the nurse and let him or her know. In this case, we're going to say her weight increased significantly. It was unplanned. We were not, her diet wasn't changed. We weren't trying to get her to gain weight. And I'm going to say, called the nurse, spoke with nurse Jackie Miller. The nurse recommended that a nutritional be scheduled. And again, you can mention anybody. You can mention any of our admin staff. So I don't know if DeRoja is up and running as the nursing specialist in this capacity, but you could mention DeRoja and you can say, please schedule Daisy for a nutritional assessment as soon as possible. Again, I don't want to put it out there because I'm not sure that DeRoja is up and running in that capacity. So maybe it's just your supervisor and you say, right in here is Trisha or Patricia. That's always a good question. Patricia. Maybe you need to notify your supervisor and just say, hey, please schedule Daisy for a nutritional assessment ASAP, because that is what the nurse said. Again, I would use mentions in the notes section as a great way to communicate back and forth between your staff as a supervisor and encourage your staff to communicate with you, especially if you're not on shift with them. This is a great way for you to be kept in the loop instead of having to go back through the care tracker from the day before just to see the notes. So if there's something that needs to be brought to your attention, using mentions is a great way to bring that to your attention. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say done. Okay, do want to show you here. So I did jump to the 20th. So you can see a compliance meter over here because I haven't documented anything for Donald Duck and I only documented one thing for Daisy Duck. You can see this is not all the way green. This is an as needed chart, so I don't have to document that. That's not going to mess up my compliance. But the bowel movement chart does need to be done, and I need to do that for all of the shifts. A great way to kind of keep on track of that is to select all. And once you select all, you can see very clearly, what needs to be done for this person. Okay, and you can do the same thing for Donald. Donald obviously has 25 things that are scheduled, so that's going to be a little bit more. But this is a great way as a supervisor to kind of say, show me that whole day. And if it doesn't have a little check mark in a green box that said who did it and when, then that wasn't done. Okay, and then follow-up needs to take place with that DSP to make sure documentation is happening when it's supposed to be happening. Okay, so one more thing that I want to show you, and that is how to get to the charts if you have entered this information. Okay, you always have the ability to kind of click down and see the month's worth of information that has been entered. So this is, you can see sort of a snapshot of the month. So if it was, especially something like a seizure record or a bowel movement chart, that should be done, 3 times a day. A seizure, if somebody has an active seizure disorder, then that would be done multiple times throughout the week. Then you would be able to kind of quickly see, what day this was charted for, who charted it, that initial, and it'll kind of give you a breakdown of the different statuses for that particular item. But to get more in depth of what you really want to see, it's going to be in that person's e-chart. So if you go to the People tab, and Miss Daisy Duck, if you go to her e-chart, and you scroll down to these lovely little green buttons, this is where, that shortcut that the DSP has on their home screen, this is basically the same thing. So everybody has access to this in somebody's e-chart. Again, this is not where you enter the information. This is just where you can pull that information. So for the weight record, if I did have multiple weights for Daisy Duck in here, you would be able to see sort of a line graph with that. You would be able to see a list of the staff that have entered weights and the dates and the times and the weights that were actually entered. All of that would come up. So here we go. This is the only weight that I put in for her so far. So if I scroll down, I can see, the date and the time. I can see who did it. I can see the notes. And if I had multiple dates here, you would be able to see a chart to see the fluctuation of somebody's weight. Okay, but again, this is not where we would enter that information. This is just where we can see a summary of that information. We enter the information through the care tracker. And just like any button that you click on the e-chart, you could give it a date range. So you could say, I only want to see 1 month at a time. I want to see an entire year at a time. Whatever works for you. You can also see it just in a list form. So you can do that. That's the weight record. Okay. You can do the same thing for the bowel movement record, the seizure logs, the menstrual logs. And then if you do have the vital signs like blood pressure, temps, anything like that, and blood sugar logs entered through your EMR, then you can pull up sort of a summary within these charts. And I will send out sort of a review on how to add things like that to the EMR. Because again, I know it's been a while since we started the EMR back in October. So I'll send out a refresher on how to add things like blood pressure checks. If you ever needed to add a temperature check or anything like that, blood sugar logs, all of that, I will provide you with a refresher on how to add that to your EMRs, because those are things that need to be scheduled, and we want them scheduled through the EMR and not just enter it through here. So again, these are just ways to see that sort of summary, but all of the information should be entered through the care tracker for the bowel movement chart, the menstrual chart, the seizure chart, and the weight chart. Okay. Blood sugar records, and then other vital signs like blood pressure, that should be entered through the EMR. These are just ways for you to pull the summary. Okay. So please reach out to me if you have any questions. You can reach out to your supervisor as well. If you have any trouble inputting any of this information within the care tracker, or you find that you are missing something or something needs to be charted a different way for someone in your house, please let your supervisor or myself know so that I can fix that for you. Okay. Thank you.